Welcome to the RD Squeeze. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Emily.
And we're two dietitian besties here to squeeze out the misinformation around health and nutrition.
Everyone, welcome to the RD Squeeze. I'm Emily.
And I'm Mickey. Welcome to, what is this, episode 15? Holy moly.
Yeah, we're talking about resumes, cover letters, and personal statements. Oh my.
Yeah, that is my play on the Wizard of Oz there. But yeah, so that's the next episode in this series. I'm excited to get into it. We're gonna cover stuff that you should and should not do, and all the fun things, and kind of just give you an ins and out, especially from a program director perspective. But Emily has definitely been involved in professionalism stuff with me, so she usually gives lectures to students on professionalism for me. So she is definitely one to consider and contribute to this conversation as well. So very excited.
Yeah. So we're going to start with resumes, because that's kind of like your biggest thing it's your collection of what you've done in your life professionally, if you will.
Right.
So I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the top things we want to make sure we have in there, and then we'll go into them. But highlight relevant experience. So if you're in an undergrad program, even a grad program, you're going into a DI program, whatever it might be, you want to make sure that this is more on the nutrition and dietetics realm. Now, yes, if you're undergrad and it's not that nutrition focus at this point, just that science focus, what have you done in those areas? We want to tailor to dietetic roles then. So we'll get into that. And then we just want to make sure we're keeping it concise. Now, from my perspective, how I write, my resume is actually a CV. And so my CV is 11 pages long. But once you get into your career, that's probably when you'll switch over more to a CV. Once you're starting your career out, that's where a resume is, where a program director really just wants to see the highlights of what you've done, and again, to that kind of succinct information, so they can really quickly review it to kind of compare them to other students.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, I don't foresee any students who are especially applying to an undergrad program having a resume longer than really a first page. I mean, if you have a front and a back, that's wonderful. And then same thing for dietetic students applying for internships. It really should only be one front and back at the most. Definitely once you get more into your career, and if they're asking for CVs, because that's the other thing too, that's more of an academia thing for sure, but other people have it as well, especially if they have teaching experience or speaking experience or research experience. But resumes really are just supposed to highlight really your experiences that are relevant to the position you're applying for. So, I mean, that's the other thing. If you've had multiple jobs or like a lot of odds and ends, but aren't relevant to what you're looking for or what you're applying for, maybe don't include it. I think like a lot of people think they have to include every single work experience they ever had, and that's not necessarily the best thing to do. Like, if I still included that I worked at an ice cream place, nowadays, that would not be relevant. So, just keep that in mind. But I'm even considering having like just a resume, because my CV is so long. I forget how long mine is. It's super long. But just so that way, like if I wanted to just highlight the basic experiences that I had, and then like if I wanted to send it out, I could. But regardless, if you're a student, I think a resume is just, front and back. A couple things to consider too. Keep it simple when you're doing a resume, because especially for jobs, maybe not so much for programs, but maybe for jobs, they will put those resumes and cover letters through like an AI software to screen out like relevant applicants. And maybe schools that are more advanced do this. We don't, because we look through everything. But they might look through that, and sometimes AI doesn't like recognize like weird fonts or colors or images, things like that. So I definitely would avoid. I mean, if it's cute and you're handing it out in person, go for it. But otherwise, I would keep it relatively simple.
Yeah.
And then even like I've seen a lot of students put pictures on their resume, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I think that's more for an HR reason. So to me, it's like I don't want to. I'll get to know you in the interview process or something. Like I don't know if that's necessarily the most beneficial use of space on a resume. I have seen students put like links to their like professional social media accounts. So if they're doing like an RD2B, you know, Instagram, or if they're doing a blog, or if they have like an e-portfolio where they have their resume, their experiences, pictures, school projects, things like that they want to highlight, but obviously you can't put all that in a resume. That's a great addition to put on there.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like seeing those things, but having your picture right on the front of the resume is not the best.
I agree. Because a lot of times too, employers sometimes even just take your name off of your resume. So if it's getting a little formatted funky with your picture on the whole side and then your name at the top, they can't really do that. And so there could be bias in that recommendation in who they decide to choose as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So a lot of places will do blind applications. So they'll have somebody omit like identifying information and then rank applicants or like that they want to interview. This is for jobs and potentially programs. It depends on the program, but so that's a good point because they might want to keep it unbiased and just rank it objectively. So if you have your picture on that, or if even your name, there's studies out there that have said that like if someone has a specific name, or if it's a female name versus a male name, or if it's like something that would be more insinuating that they're like of a different ethnicity than like white. So like if it's like, I'll just use Lopez or Garcia or something, even that if that's your married name, it gives a bias. So that's why some places do that. So
Although who knows now with the reversal of DEI programs.
yes. So we'll see. I don't know what that'll look like, but for now, that's kind of how things work with resumes. And for me as a program director, and I can't speak for all program directors out there, but when I'm looking for a student, I'm looking for work and volunteer experience and leadership in particular. And I don't. Some people can put their GPA on their resume. I say you could, but if it's in your application or your transcript, I don't think you need to put it every single place. But you could include it if it's a really good one.
Honestly, I have never put my GPA on a resume ever. I just don't think it's the right spot for it. That's more for school. That's more for getting into a program. Now, resume may be for your DI programs or applications, but you're going to already have that most likely in your application, wherever that's supposed to be put. So you don't need to put it in your resume if you will.
Yeah. Another thing that I've seen a lot of people stop doing, and I'm not against this, is omitting your address from your resume. I know that was like a common practice to put your full address at the top. I don't think we're doing as much mailing anymore, so you're kind of wasting some valuable potential space that you might need. You can put your city and your state or your region or something, but there's also again something that comes out about bias where depending on where you live can lead to a bias about your socioeconomic status. So that's why they're saying maybe just put your city or your zip code or something, unless it's specifically asked for.
That's a good idea.
Which brings up another good point. Don't put references on your resume. You can put references available on request if you want, but don't put them on your resume. It just takes up more space than it needs to. And chances are, especially for programs, they're asking for recommendation letters. So those are going to be your references. And then if a job asks for it, you usually will have either a separate document or they'll have you fill out a specific portion of the application that will have references. So unless it specifically says include references, I would say leave that off as well.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And make sure you're tailoring, what you're writing to dietetic roles. So if you did patient education, meal planning, data analysis, if you had teamwork, make sure you're using those types of terminology as well. So that way it sticks out to a program manager. And include, like, if you have other certifications, if you're working in a food service area, maybe not in like high school, but maybe in undergrad, you actually had to get ServSafe certified. Put that on your resume. That shows that like you had to do something that dietitians have to do. Most of them end up doing. And a lot of times for undergrad programs, that might even be required as part of your undergrad program. If you have CPR, make sure you're putting that. If you're a part of different associations like the academy, like other, societies, organizations, make sure you're putting those on there, because that shows, again, as we talked about in our last episode, that you're involved in not just studying and school and getting good grades. You're trying to be involved and do other things, gain knowledge from other areas, and then network too is another kind of area. I think, it shows that you're willing to kind of go outside of just the usual, if you will.
Yeah, I think you'll hear a lot of program directors especially say that they're looking at the whole applicant, the holistic approach to the applicant. Um, and I think they say that mainly because we're not so focused on just grades. We want to see that you can time manage, that you can do multiple things, that you can that you have a variety of experiences. You're well rounded is usually a word I use, is like I want to see that you're well rounded. So I definitely agree with that. I think highlighting all those different experiences is super important, and making sure that you look like you've done different things and you've had some life experience essentially. Because I worry about those people that kind of come in and they just do schoolwork and that's it. Like, how are you going to handle a conflict, or how are you going to chances are, unless you're doing group work maybe, but the more experiences you have, the more you can pull from and be adaptable and be able to approach those things moving forward. So
right. Yeah. Anything else on resumes that we missed?
I think the only thing I wanted to cover there is just, don't use the same word to say what you've done. I feel like we get into the rut of like, oh, I led this team and I led this group and I managed this person, or I organized. I see organized a lot. I organized, or I planned. Use different words that are engaging and really showcase what you actually did, and be prepared to talk about those if you are doing an interview. And be sure to talk about, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but talk about what you did specifically. So if you're saying on your resume, even, I delivered 300 meals to Meals on Wheels group, but you only delivered 50, it was like a team of you, make sure you specify what you did. Because if I say, oh, how did you do that? And you're like, oh, well, actually, or you just are embellishing a little bit or something, that might come off as I don't know, just not the greatest impression. So,
right.
But yeah, so that's the only thing I wanted to add there, is just you could AI search a bunch of action verbs to replace or use synonyms or whatever. It's not that hard. So just take the time to do that.
And another tip, if you're listening as a dietitian or someone looking for a job too, utilize the terms they have in the job postings. Now, not word for word, but take those action words and utilize those, because that's what the AI is going to be pulling.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially like I said, for jobs. I think more so for programs, we're looking at like I said, we're looking at them. I really don't think there's a lot of places that are using AI, but I don't know, I could be wrong. But yeah, but for jobs, yeah, definitely do that.
All right. So next up is cover letters we want to touch on. So main points here, we want to personalize each letter. So meaning if you're applying to numerous programs, make sure you're editing that and personalizing it. Showcase your fit and use a professional tone. So we'll dive into those. So going back to the personalizing each letter, make sure that you're putting the correct program director in there, the correct address, the correct school. Make sure you're putting the right date that maybe you sent it, because maybe you're doing one day and one another day. Make sure you really fine tooth look at those things, so that way it's not overlooked and you accidentally sent the wrong one to a different program.
Yeah, I've gotten that in an application before. I've gotten Dear Mrs. Smith, and I'm like, that's not me. And then I'm like, okay, maybe they just didn't know, or it was a placeholder. And then I'm like, then it scrolls down and it's like, I'm applying from Banana College, and I'm like, all right. And then it's like, I'm applying to your program because it sounds great. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this is just you just didn't even. And that again shows attention to detail. So that is something we look for. Especially me. I look for, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm saying I think that's something that would kind of be a glaring error to do that. So yeah, definitely agree with that one. And then, as you mentioned, the next one would be showcasing, your fit. So again, we kind of talked about that in the resume, but also the cover letter is where you can elaborate on specific things that make you a better fit than other candidates. So resume is like the logistics, but the cover letter is where you kind of showcase what you did, or like your personal touch on it, or like why you have a tie to the program, or why you have a tie to this job, why it's important to you to be, chosen, what makes sets you apart than everybody. That's a good place to put in your cover letter. You want to highlight why you would be a good candidate, so they are interested in seeing or hearing more from you, and either doing an interview or really considering your application.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head what a cover letter is, because you're kind of in the middle of that personal statement where you're not going super in depth into like what you've accomplished and all the data and statistics and all those things, but you're diving into what's your connection to this role, and how have in general, and maybe there's one specific or two specific little things in there you put, how does your past experience allow you to be the best fit or have the interest in this program, if you will.
Yeah. And let's clarify, I think a cover letter can be a few paragraphs, but it shouldn't be more than one front page.
Yes.
If you're going on to the second back part of the page, it's like, okay, but really it should just be that front page.
Mm-hmm.
So really
Yeah.
concisely explain why you would be a good fit, and why they should consider you, and what makes them want to give you a second look. I think is the
And
key
all
there.
pretty much all three of those points you just said are each of your paragraphs.
Yeah,
So you're going to have literally like 3 to 5 sentences on those points, and that's it.
yeah. And then we talked about using like the professional tone. So I mean, sometimes I've seen students do this where they use like abbreviations, or like not proper like texting language.
Yeah, right.
Or it's like I think we would vibe really well. Like I say that on the podcast, but I'm not saying that in a cover letter. Like I really I get with the vibe of your program or something. Like you don't want to use this like casual language in terms of when you're putting your professional self
Right.
out there. And I think the biggest thing too is like ending with why they should interview you, or really want to consider you, and then also making sure that I think it's important just to say, if there's anything that is unclear, or you have questions, please reach out to me. I can, I'd love to be considered for an interview. Another thing too, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, was in your cover letter, if there is a glaring problem. So for example, if you're applying to a program with like a low GPA, you might want to allude to why that might be, or like how you've addressed that, and like, or say like, I know this might not be the most professional way to say this, but like, I know my GPA compared to some students may be on the lower end of the spectrum, but I also maintained a full-time job, or I was a president of a program, or I had experienced a hardship at that time, but I overcame it by working on my time management, or seeking a tutor, or whatever. Like you can
Exactly.
highlight that briefly, and then hopefully in an interview you can elaborate on that a little bit more. But if you're worried about something, it's better to address it than just like hope they don't notice it, because chances are they will.
Yeah. Great point there.
Anything else on cover letters then?
I don't think so.
All right.
I think
Well, then
I'm
the
all good.
next is the personal statement, which again is kind of like an elaboration of your cover letter and sharing basically your story. So this is really the personal document. Um, I would say if there's a prompt or something. Well, I guess Emily, you were listing off all of our points first, so I'll let you do that.
Okay, yeah. So you want to answer the prompt. So usually in a personal statement, the program will have some prompts for you to make sure that you're answering. So make sure you're hitting all those points. A good idea for that is to kind of just bullet them initially and then kind of finish them. Share your story. So this is really the time for you to shine and say like why you're so interested in dietetics and why you want to come to this program and what kind of stuck out. you want to demonstrate self-awareness, and you want to definitely proofread, as we've been saying, and seek feedback for sure before you kind of finalize this. So for answering the prompt, again, you want to follow those guidelines from the program or the employer. Make sure you're hitting all the points and then elaborate on those points. So that way, you've met the goals of what they are asking you. And again, as Mary has said, that's like the attention to detail. I think a lot of times, and this is in numerous areas I've kind of overseen, whether it's students or colleagues or whatnot, they miss the point of like the 3 questions, and they get like the first 1.5, and then they kind of went on a rant and forgot about the last one. So make sure you're hitting all of them. Share your career goals, your motivation, your qualifications, if that kind of alludes to the answers to the questions or prompts.
Yeah, I think that's really good point. And then even, I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit too, but the prompt may not always be the same for every program, or for jobs, you're not really going to get a personal statement. So this really is specific to programs. Maybe even if you're not applying to a dietetic program, maybe you're applying to a different type of program. Like maybe you decide you want to go to med school. I don't know. Regardless, if there's a reason why you need to do a personal statement, think about selling yourself, but also, again, addressing any maybe misconceptions about yourself that might come up in your application, but share why you're doing what you're doing, like what brought you to this path. And I do say avoid like getting into the nitty-gritty details of the personal stuff. So like I will use an example. I don't know if many dietitians have seen this, but I make the joke, it's not really a good joke, but I make the joke that like dietetic students are either they love food or they have an eating disorder, and that does not apply to everybody. But it's like something I usually like. It's a common theme that they will most likely have an eating disorder, which is why they get into dietetics, because they never had exposure to a dietitian prior to that. So that's like what they want to do. You can mention that you maybe have an eating disorder, but then I wouldn't go through all of the nitty-gritty details of how you came out of that in your personal statement. I think that can err on the side of unprofessional. So just be very cautious of what you do and do not include in the details of your story. I think keep it to, I experienced this, but this is how I overcame it. And the specific steps you took to showcase your strengths coming out of that, I think is a good way to think about it. So don't say like, oh, my mom had to come pick me up, or like, don't highlight the bad stuff. Highlight the good that came out of that scenario. And I know that's very like a privileged way to think, that hopefully you came out of it. Hopefully you're in recovery or something, but, maybe don't, if it's a touchy subject, don't include it in the personal statement either, because if somebody asks about it, you have to be prepared to talk about it as well. But I don't know if Emily, did that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Because I'm not saying that to you. I'm like, would that make sense to other people? Because I get worried sometimes when people do personal statements and they keep it super personal, and I'm like, I didn't need to know all that. Like sure. It's still a professional relationship. I didn't need to know some of this stuff. So,
or like my example that I've used is I read an article on blueberries, and that's what made me decide to be a dietitian. Boom, straightforward. Like I didn't have to say, my dad got these articles and I would read them because he would put them in front of me. And this one day I ended up reading it, and there was a dietitian who wrote the article. And then, I thought about it and I thought how cool that was. And then I was like, maybe I should go and be a dietitian. That's too lengthy. Like, be to the point. Like you said, I had an eating disorder and this is how I overcame it, or this is then what caused me to decide I wanted to be a dietitian. Boom, straightforward.
And even just not even an eating disorder. Like, for example, Emily, I see a lot too of like, I got diagnosed with celiac disease. Okay, wonderful. I'm glad that's how you found out that you wanted to be a dietitian, but I don't need to know all the ins and outs of how you got diagnosed and like how you were in and out of the hospital. Like, I don't need to know all that. I just want to know, oh, okay, you saw a dietitian after that, and that's what inspired you. Awesome. Lovely. Yeah. Love to hear it. Like, love that journey for you. But that maybe that's like a less triggering example, but I just yeah, I don't know. I wanted to
No, I
highlight
think that
that.
was a good one then. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I
When
like how you pointed out too, don't focus on negatives, focus on the positives.
Yes, I think that's like the one of the biggest mistakes I will see, and a lot of feedback I give is like people tend to they'll say how they did something, but then they'll almost downplay it or become negative about it, or they'll second guess themselves on what they did, or like they'll I don't know, like there's not confidence in that answer. So that's
Mhm.
another thing is like again, I'm kind of alluding more to interviews because that's on my brain right now. But even in cover letters, like just own it, like own your shit, just own it, and be prepared to address it, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
And then just know for growth, like where you need to grow in, and how is the program that you're going to go into, how is that going to help you do that if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to build on your skills. Obviously that's typically what these programs are, so you can become a dietitian. How is that program going to allow you to meet that goal of being a dietitian? Are you going to be able to then, you know, if it's focused in clinical, if it's focused in health promotion, like you're going to be able to take the passion that allowed you or wanted, created that desire to be a dietitian, to become that passionate dietitian.
yeah, and I mean you kind of led into the next point, which was like that self-awareness piece, like knowing how you showed growth and just being aware of
Mm-hmm.
what you did to do that. And to me that shows maturity, which especially when undergrad students are transitioning to a graduate program or like a master's program or a dietetic internship or any type of like entry level job, we can be a little wary about those younger people just because sometimes they lack that maturity and that self-awareness. So if you can highlight that and you highlight it well, I think you'll be golden. Like you'll definitely at least get an interview or like a
Yeah.
second glance on an application. So
Yeah. And then again, just proofread, look for feedback, utilize those faculty resources if you can, organization leaders that you might be under. Maybe it's someone that you're kind of at the same level with. Have them look at it and give you that feedback. And this kind of shows that maturity as well, as if you can take constructive feedback. If you're not defensive about, well, this is why I did it, take the feedback. If it doesn't work how you want it to, that's a different story. Or if like maybe the message is going to get misconstrued because of what they're recommending, that's different. But you're here to learn, and this is a learning process, all of it. So take some of those recommendations and work with them. And again, that shows maturity in that you're not defensive about having constructive feedback, because in all honesty, being in these programs, you are going to get it constantly, and you need to
right.
be able to take that feedback. So showing that before you even get into the program, not that maybe a director is going to know that you got feedback on your statements and all that, but being able to at least have that knowledge is going to be really beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I even like I'm thinking about our programs. Like our program director for the DPD program would review all of their personal statements, whereas like she reviews it at least. I don't know like if she's like super fine tooth comb with it, but she definitely looks it over. But I would say get as much feedback as you can to don't just rely on one person, because I think the more eyes, the more perspectives you see. I mean, this just happened with me recently too. Like for the longest time, all my papers, I have my mom read them because she was always kind of like she's the one that taught me proper grammar basically. And I had a friend that I had met fairly recently, and they offered to read one of my papers for my class that I had took over the fall. And they had so much more feedback than my mom did, and like that's not a bad thing. I loved the feedback and I loved the criticism and I loved you know the changes that I hadn't thought of. And not that my mom didn't do a good job, it's just like having those second set of eyes and those different perspectives can really um give you more of a holistic approach and a holistic
Mm-hmm.
view of what you're trying to convey and how people might perceive that. Because you might think, oh, my intent was to showcase how I overcame this struggle. I'm going back to that because it's an easy target. And they may be like, actually, though, you're really sounding negative here. Like you're sounding, so maybe you want to rephrase this or rework this or tell the story a little bit differently or something like that. And
Exactly.
maybe that wasn't your intention either. Maybe you didn't want to come off negative, but when you're reading it, it's different. Which this brings up a good point for personal statements too, and just any paper in general. Read it out loud, because I know not everybody's going to do that, but if you read it out loud, you're taking the time to read every word, and it really does see if it makes sense, and you can catch those errors that maybe, like, when you're looking at a computer screen for a really long time, you miss those errors. So that's another good way to approach it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you have quite a few other tips here too, so why don't we go ahead and go through some of those?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is being consistent. It'll be weird, and I know students do this, so I'm not like an idiot, but like, I know you use AI for stuff. I get it. I use it for stuff too. But if it's like completely different tones and different writing styles from one thing to another, that is a red flag, because I'm like, all right, you just punched in, what's a good dietetic intern resume or something. Like, that is not going to look good. So just remember to keep your voice really in your all of your materials. Make sure that it is personalized to you, and it's not just this, cookie cutter version of what you think people are looking for, because that's not what we want to look for. We want those unique perspectives and those unique, I don't know, just a unique applicant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we have AI now. You are yourself as an individual, and that is what programs want. They don't want 10 of the same people. They want 10 individuals who are all different, who are going to have a different experience, who are going to bring diversity to the table for that program, so everyone can learn from each other.
Yep. I agree. I don't think we have to hit that one. That's like, what's the phrase? Like, I don't know, beat a horse till it's dead or something. I don't know. Anyway,
I don't know phrases, whatever you call them, because I didn't grow up with them. When you say that went over your head, I literally, when I moved back to the United States, went, and my mom goes, "Oh my God, she doesn't know what expressions are."
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna have to have like
So
an
I don't know them.
expressions 101. All right. With Emily. But then, so I guess the next point too, again, is just being, again, professional, avoiding like that casual, like, lackadaisical grammar or language. And
I
again,
think that
keeping,
is my biggest pet peeve with students and interns, is when they're like BRB, or like, I mean, I use that sometimes, but they're saying like texting, or they're typing in our chat, if we're talking back and forth, and I'm like, what is that? Like, I don't know what that means.
yeah,
Or then they start documenting it, and it's like, no, nope, 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 nope. So
yeah,
yes, be professional with
yeah. I definitely think, like, get out of the habit of doing that. Like, it's different when you're texting your friends, but that brings up a really good point too, in terms of keeping it clean and like not busy, because generational differences and like the language differences and like the abbreviations, they can vary. So you don't know who's looking at your application. You don't know what age group they're looking at. So even if you did abbreviate something, you have no idea if they're going to know what you're saying. So do you really want to make that impression of like, I don't know what this is? Like, I just think avoiding that at all costs, because like you said, and keeping it simple, like the crazy designs or whatever too, or like weird colors or whatever. Like, yeah, if you're, the only way I could see that is like if you're a graphic designer or artist or something, but like, you're dietetics, this is dietetics focused, like, avoid the clutter, just keep it simple. um and then we talked about this, keeping those keywords and utilizing those, especially if they're in like their mission statement or their program goals. You can even ask like questions. Maybe have an interview, like, not an interview, but like schedule a call with a program director or a faculty member. Be like, well, what do you look for in an application, or what do you like? And then if they say, oh, we look for leadership, we look for this, we look, use that and keep that in your application and showcase how you met those things and what they're looking for. And then that way you also can let your passion shine through as well. Like, that also ties into, showcasing how you fit the bill and why you are the best fit for this program. Now, I'm rambling a little bit, but we talked about that competitiveness when we were back in the day. Like, we had to do this. I think now students don't focus on this as much because they feel like there's not that competitive level and like they can have their pick of the litter and everybody is trying to fill their slots or whatever. Yes, they might take you, but that is not going to benefit you in the long run in the future applying for jobs. So if you want to be lackadaisical about a program, they still don't have to take you. I've talked to plenty of program directors who are like, no, we vet them, like regardless of if they want to be with us or not, and if we have to fill slots, like we're definitely not going to take everybody that doesn't fit the bill. So even if you think that you have it in the bag, you don't. We had a recent student who was just struggling and was just not doing well, and we're like, we have to have an honest conversation here. Like, we want you in the program, but you're not putting your best foot forward there, and I'm hesitant to take you. So if I'm hesitant and I know you, what's that going to say for another program? So are you going to have those other options to take another program? And eventually they had like a turnaround and like we call it a come to Jesus talk, where like it's like life or death situation here, like to be dramatic, like shit or get off the pot. These are all the sayings I'm saying to you because you're going to learn them. Now that I know this. Okay. but yeah, so I think that's important as well. I don't know if that went off.
Absolutely.
All right.
And then just other resources, recommendations we have. The Academy is a huge resource for a lot of this information. Use your program directors, use your current faculty if you're in an undergrad program to help you with these things. They're going to help guide you. But if you have your resume, your cover letter, your personal statements, and if you start working on them earlier, it's easier then to get the help rather than rushing. I think that's another big thing, is people rush to do these things last minute. I remember, I think I found out sometime in the fall that I needed to have these things ready for like February. And I remember probably like October, November timeframe was when I started getting them ready. I might have updated my resume and had that all set. Then I started writing cover letters. And just like the basics then, like the main, I shouldn't say the basics, the main body of it, because then I was able to tailor it to whatever programs. I was kind of able to switch around some sentences. And then it came the personal statement. So that's kind of like rough draft until maybe January. January, you really get it into like what you want it to be. And the end of January should be kind of like, okay, let's get it out to people so they have, time to edit it and make comments on it, and then I have time to make the final edits.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. 100% agree. Want to wrap this thing up?
I think so.
All right, cool. So that's our rundown of resumes, cover letters, and personal statements. So if you have, oh my, we went through that so quickly. Yeah, so if you have questions or something's not clear, or you want us to talk more about this stuff, please let us know in the comments, or shoot us an email or message us, whatever you want to do. We're happy to take requests on topics. Also, just as a future reference, we are potentially looking for sponsorship if anybody's interested. We want to also focus on local businesses that are especially local to our area. So if you're interested and know anybody that would like to be in like sponsoring podcasts, we would love that. Let's
Northeast Pennsylvania.
Hello. Yeah, let's work together. Boop boop. Do you want to do our sweet and sours?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Oh boy, would you hate me if I said you go first this time?
No, because I always tell you to go first usually. So I got mine. I wrote mine down. So I think I'm going to start with my sour. Okay, so my sour is that as we're recording this, it's January and it's almost February. February is the dreadful month for me, like having to get through it. So it's winter, it's cold. I don't like the cold this long. Like January, fine, okay, done. But now February, it's like, oh, we get the really cold snowstorms and things like that. So I'm just not looking forward to the next month in a way. I'm trying to look at the positives, trying to look at that. So that kind of brings me to my sweet, which is that I feel like my desire to want to continue to decorate and like kind of finish some things in my house. Not finished, it's never going to be finished, but do things in my house to make it feel homey. I think I'm finally getting there. So I think like maybe tonight, or the next couple days, I might be ordering some things and getting some things, finalized, so I can kind of make a certain area in my house a little more comfortable, a little more usable. So I think that's kind of where hopefully February I'll try and think positive, and that I'm trying to get things a little more settled, so that way once the warmer weather comes and we're getting outside, I'm more comfortable on the inside.
Yeah, I love those. Awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, my sour. Oh boy. My sour is, you know what? I'm just gonna I'm gonna kind of cop out with this one. So I was recently kind of sick, and I'm still like having like some throat like irritation or something. Like I've been talking a lot, not even just today, but like in general, and I just feel like it's still not gone, and I just want it to be done. Like I just want to feel healthy for once. So that is my sour right now. And then my sweet, I'm gonna do another cop out, because this is maybe, I mean, I don't know, we're probably gonna do more virtual recordings just because our schedules are a little crazy and all over the place. But who knows if I'll get this opportunity again. So I'm gonna show everybody I've been looking off to the side a little bit because I have a co-host today. This is Scamp. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. Scamp is my Shih Tzu. He's 4 years old, and he was missing me very much. So he's like, I want to record with you. So, and he's kind of sleepy. He's like, Mom, when are we going to bed? Because we're a little late tonight. Yeah, that's snort. He's like, all right, put me back down. I'm laying down again. But so that is my sweet. I had a nice little co-host here, and he's a real good boy. So happy to have him here.
He didn't make one sound the whole time.
No, he didn't. I'm shocked. Usually when I'm on video calls, he barks and carries on, and I am in a pretty secluded room in my house right now, so it maybe caused him to behave a little bit. But yeah, I'm just happy that he sat nice and good, and he's gonna get a cookie after this. Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us on episode 15, resumes, cover letters, and personal statements. Oh my. So we will see you on episode 16 of the RD Squeeze. And remember, Mickey, what day do we come out with one?
We're freshly squeezed on Sunday. So if you're in the mood for a boost of juice from the RD Squeeze, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up as I go.
That was great.
We're freshly squeezed on Sunday. So tune in next time, and we can't wait to see you again on the RD Squeeze. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. We will always take topics you want to hear about, so message us for any topics you want to see covered on the RD Squeeze. Don't forget, it's Dietitian with a T. We'll see you next time on the RD Squeeze.